So today I am expected to speak on a very important topic, the Indian knowledge system, which is a part of the new education policy. Let me share the screen. Yes. I suppose you can see, right?
Yes.
And it looks like the Indian, whatever they understand as Indian knowledge systems, it looks like that is the main plank of the new education policy that has been introduced in 2020. Upfront, the policy document says the rich heritage of science, of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought has been a guiding light of this policy. But in the 66-page document, we do not find any mention of what actually they understand as the Indian knowledge system or this ancient and eternal Indian knowledge. It only says this much. In Article 4.27, it says knowledge of India will include knowledge from ancient India and its contributions to modern India and its successes and challenges. Indian knowledge systems, including tribal knowledge and indigenous and traditional ways of learning, will be covered and included in mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, yoga, architecture, medicine, agriculture, and so on and so forth. And an engaging course on Indian knowledge systems will also be available to students in secondary school as an elective. But if they are going to introduce a course on Indian knowledge systems, obviously we need to understand what it contains. What do they understand as the Indian knowledge systems? Unfortunately, the document does not say anything of that sort. So what do we count on? By reading this document, most educationists therefore could not see the problem that is coming. But soon after this, soon after the document was placed, from 6 to 8 November, there was a international webinar organized at IIT Kharagpur. The proceedings of that are available on YouTube. You can also see. And in that program, all the big shots in the education ministry were there. The Minister of Education, Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank, he was there. The Minister of State for Education was there. The Secretary of Education was there. So all the big shots in education, they were there in one webinar organized by IIT Kharagpur. And in that webinar, the proceedings of the webinar gave us some inkling of what was coming. And soon, all the institutions that are governed by the Ministry of Education received this note from the ministry, which says they are requesting all the institutes to organize webinars on NEP in collaboration dissemination NEP organized by Bharatiya Shikshan Mandal. Now, this is a non-governmental entity, and the government is asking us to organize dissemination programs in collaboration with this Bharatiya Shikshan Mandal. And wherever these programs were organized, the deliberation by the representative of the Bharatiya Shikshan Mandal made it clear that out of all the clauses of the new education policy, this is what they have at the center of their plan. So all the discussions centered around how glorious was our past, and we should disseminate that to our students. So let us now try to understand what they understand as the knowledge available in our glorious past. I'll also talk about what knowledge actually was available. So since the document itself does not talk about the Indian knowledge system, but they're talking everywhere on the Indian knowledge system, so we have to understand this from their own utterances, wherever they have discussed it. What did they talk about? For example, this man, the Uttarakhand Chief Minister, Trivendra Singh Rawat, he says that cow is the only animal that exhales oxygen. This is the Chief Minister of Tripura, Biplab Dev. He says the internet existed in the days of Mahabharata, because how else could Sanjay give a running commentary of the Mahabharata war to the blind king? So there must be internet and television at that time. In the Indian Science Congress that was organized in 2015, one man called Captain Anand J. Bodas, he presented a paper, apparently it's paper, so which claimed that airplanes were there in the Vedic times, and these were enormous structures, and this could fly not only forward like the modern planes, but also left, right, back. And unlike the modern, today's planes, airplanes, the Vedic airplanes could fly between planets. So this was claimed. You might think that this is ludicrous claim, everybody will laugh it off, but no. In the aforementioned international webinar that happened in IIT Kharagpur, the Minister of Education announced that they are going to open a Center of Excellence on Indian knowledge systems at IIT Kharagpur. And elated, the director of IIT Kharagpur announced that what would this Center of Excellence work on? What will it research? He said it will research on whether or not the Pushpak Vimana that is said to be there in the time of the Vedic times was really there or not, and if they are really there, what was the design? They will do research on that. So it is, according to them, a part of the Indian knowledge system. That's what I'm trying to point out. And these are the designs of these ancient Indian craft that was presented in that particular paper. Actually, these are from a book called Vaimanika Shastra, and it has been proved that it is not an ancient book. It was written in the early 20th century. And these drawings were made by a draftsman from the Mysore University. So it is definitely a modern thing. But interesting is that a group of professors and students from IISc Bangalore actually took this book seriously and actually did research on the structures that are shown here. And they wrote a paper which concluded that such structures simply cannot fly. This man, he was the Union Minister of State of Education, Satyapal Singh. He said Darwin's theory is wrong. Why? Because nobody has seen an ape turning into a man. And not only that, he being the education minister, he said that the curriculum has to be changed and Darwin's theory has to be dropped from the curriculum. And then comes the Indian Prime Minister's. Okay, let us hear that from his own voice.
मतलब मैं विज्ञान को तो ज्यादा समझता भी नहीं, जानता भी नहीं, लेकिन शायद आज से 40-50 वर्ष पहले किसी ने स्टेम सेल्स ट्रीटमेंट की चर्चा की होती तो लोगों को बड़ा अजूबा लगा होगा कि ये कैसे संभव होगा, ये तो हवा की बातें हैं सब वगैरह। लेकिन जिन्होंने महाभारत पढ़ा है या सुना है, उनको मैं महाभारत की तरफ ले जाना चाहता हूं। और मेरी जो छोटी सी समझ है उसके हिसाब से मुझे लगता है कि कर्ण का जो जन्म हुआ था वो स्टेम सेल का साइंस था, टेक्नोलॉजी थी। क्योंकि शास्त्र कहते हैं कि कर्ण का जन्म माता कुंती की गोद से नहीं हुआ था। कर्ण के जन्म की सारी जो कथा आती है वो शरीर पर से एक छोटा सा हिस्सा लिया और उसी में से कर्ण पैदा हुए हैं। आप स्टेम सेल वाले यही करते हो ना? डॉक्टरों का सर्टिफिकेट चाहिए। तात्पर्य यह है कि हमारे देश के पास कुछ तो था। अब आज लेबोरेटरी में सिद्ध हो रहा है, लेबोरेटरी हो सकता है अमेरिका की हो, लेकिन ये सिद्ध हो रहा है। हो सकता है कर्ण के संबंध में किसी के मन में सवाल हो कि भाई शायद मोदी जी ने कहा, लेकिन उतना तो वर्णन नहीं है। अब हम प्लास्टिक सर्जरी को देखें। मुझे लगता है कि दुनिया में सबसे पहली प्लास्टिक सर्जरी शरीर मनुष्य का और माथा हाथी का, गणेश जी का निर्माण।
And then let us hear Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank, who is speaking in the parliament.
अणुबम का परीक्षण लाखों वर्ष पहले ऋषि कणाद ने किया था इस धरती पर। हमारा ज्ञान और विज्ञान में कोई कमी नहीं है। जिस बारे में हास्यास्पद स्थिति में कहा जा रहा था कि गणेश जी का शीर्ष अलग हो गया और दक्ष प्रजापति का शीर्ष अलग हो गया, तो वो सर्जरी थी, जी थी। वो पूरी दुनिया में वो विज्ञान कहाँ है जो हमारे पास है? सिर से धड़ अलग होने पर उस धड़ पर सिर का प्रत्यारोपण करने का यदि विज्ञान था, वो गणित थी, वो ज्ञान था, तो केवल हिंदुस्तान की धरती पर था। और ज्योतिष का तो श्रीमान लाखों वर्ष पहले और लाखों वर्ष आगे की गणना करने वाला विज्ञान तो ज्योतिष के सामने बौना है। यदि इस विज्ञान को उसके आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए। और इसलिए मैं कहना चाहता हूं, ये ज्योतिष विज्ञान सारी दुनिया के लिए नंबर 1 है श्रीमान। इस पे चर्चा होनी चाहिए, केवल कुछ शब्दों में कह करके उस ज्योतिष विज्ञान को जो सारी दुनिया का मार्गदर्शन करता है।
Okay, so we get the point. What knowledge system existed in ancient India? Stem cell technology existed. Technology to plant a elephant's head on a human torso existed. The Jyotish or the astrology that existed in ancient India, modern science is a dwarf in comparison to that knowledge. We also hear that cow is the only animal that can exhale oxygen. We hear that internet and television existed in ancient India. So we have a wholesome picture of the Indian knowledge system. And this is what they are going to project as a knowledge system that existed in India. And not only that, if it were a matter of their own belief, I would not mind. You are free to believe in a free country, you are free to believe anything, but these will be included in the curriculum. That is what the policy document says. Now, can't you argue that, can't this be true? I mean, is it impossible that these things actually existed? Actually, there are a few reasons for which this could not have existed. Firstly, that all these claims regarding internet, regarding stem cell, regarding television, regarding aircraft, all these claims have been made after these things have been invented by modern science, never before. Before the Wright brothers first invented the aircraft and aircraft became something of daily use, nobody claimed that aircraft were there in ancient India. Nobody said that the Pushpak Vimana was an aircraft. Nobody said that Karna's birth was a result of stem cell technology. Before stem cell technology, actually the phrase was heard in modern science. Secondly, if these technologies or these ideas were there, really in the Vedic times, they would be found in the Vedic texts, and therefore discoveries or inventions should have been made by reading the Vedic texts. No discovery has ever been made by reading those ancient texts. Thirdly, see, in order to make an aircraft, you need some knowledge about some basic sciences, aerodynamics. How does the pressure vary depending on the flow of air on airfoil? Aerodynamics, thermodynamics, internal combustion engine, some way to propel the craft. All these things have to be there, control theory and all that put together. Finally, we could make an aircraft, not before. So any development, therefore, needs some prior development of basic sciences, like television. Before the television is invented, we have to have a wholesome idea about propagation of electromagnetic waves. We have to have a wholesome idea about, say, reception of the wave, amplification and all that, transistors. All these technologies have to be developed. Only then can a television or internet can come into existence. Nobody talks about these being there in the ancient times. Even not even Bernoulli's principle, for example, or Maxwell's equations. Nobody ever talks about these being there in the ancient times. And most importantly, there is no evidence. If there were really aircraft flying in the Vedic skies, at least a broken piece should be found in some archaeological site. Not a single such evidence has been found in any archaeological site. So we can state with confidence that these are only matters of personal belief. These actually are not knowledge systems that existed in ancient India. The problem is that this is what they're trying to incorporate in the curriculum. Now, as I said, that in that international webinar at IIT Kharagpur, the minister announced that he would be creating a center of excellence for Indian knowledge systems, and it has already been created. And you can see, if you visit the IIT Kharagpur website, you can see it's there. I'm just copying, and I have copied and pasted from their website. Now, what is the Center of Excellence for Indian Knowledge System actually doing? The first thing they did was to publish a calendar. And the calendar states upfront that there is a purpose for this calendar. It is not just any calendar that you look up the dates. The purpose is a propagation of an idea. What are these? Recognition of the secret of the Vedas, reinterpretation of the Indus Valley Civilization, and rebuttal to the Aryan invasion myth. And they say that in the following 12 pages of 12 months, they are providing 12 evidences. Now, I would request you to really take a look at these calendar and read through what they say are the 12 evidences. If you can make sense of it, you are a genius. But I'm just giving you a few glimpses. For example, on the first page itself, what they say, an evidence. A long evolutionary sequence, they write, sequence of literature and cultural and spiritual texts are evident prior to the birth of the Buddha and the Mahavira. It must have taken a few thousand years to achieve that. Is that an evidence? That you believe that it must have taken a few thousand years to achieve that? So all their claims are of that type. The basis of these are based on personal beliefs. The glaciers of Mount Kailash is the source of two important river valley civilizations, the Sindhu or Indus Valley Civilization from its pre-Harappan to post-Harappan time, and the Sanpo or the Brahmaputra Valley Civilization. Now, firstly, this is not a fact. All these rivers are fed by by the ice melting from the frozen areas, and these are spread over a very large region. And Mount Kailash is only a particular place. It is not true that all these rivers start from the Mount Kailash. It's not true, but it's belief. Then they say that this particular symbol, this swastika symbol that is there, that is a representative of cyclic time and reincarnation. And there's a non-linear pattern. Anything that you draw which is not straight line is non-linear. Now, therefore, these are all non-linear patterns. And then they claim that this is there in the Indus Valley seals, and therefore this is the same thing as the Vedic drawing of the swastika. It so happens that the swastika symbol is there in every civilization, from African to South American, Aztecs and Incas, to Chinese, to even Scandinavian. In those countries, in all these places, this swastika symbol is found. So are everybody a descendant of the Vedic rishis? No, definitely not. It is just that it is a particular symbol that is there everywhere, not only in the Indus Valley civilization. This is a long thing. It's difficult to read, but I would just read a line, and if you can understand what this line means, I'll be illuminated. The paragraph ends by saying this is gnosis, and the ontology of being and becoming. Indian spirituality is therefore prognosis, gnosis, and the return or diagnosis. I fail to understand what it means, but high sounding words, and it is the whole calendar is full of such things. And it so happens that in the Indus seals, there is one particular animal's picture which has one horn. Now, it is an imaginary animal because you can see that the body is of a bull and the head is like a deer's, and there's a one horn, and they have immediately they have made a one-to-one connection with something called Ekashringa Rishi. So I do not see any Rishi here, but nevertheless they picturize, imagine it in the form of a Rishi. And in the Western civilization, there is the imagination of a unicorn with a horse with a one horn, and there is they make a one-to-one correspondence with it where there is none. Not only that, neurophysiologically, they say it is the spinal cord, the inner trunk of yoga, shoots above the eyebrow. Now, this is nonsense to the power infinity. Now, the question is, their main claim in this calendar was that Indus Valley civilization was a part of the Vedic era. Why do they want to show that? Essentially, they want to show that the whole civilization in every place started from India. So it started from India and radiated outward in every part of the globe. And the Indus Valley civilization, right at the doorstep of India, is a problem. And so they wanted to show that that is also nothing but that great civilization that we see. Great means in the sense of technological development, much advanced for the time. Because they had brick-built buildings, they had grid pattern of streets, they had covered drains, drainage system, and so on and so forth. These things are unparalleled in a similar civilization of that time. And they want to show that the Vedic, these Indus Valley civilization, in fact, it's called actually Harappan civilization, not Indus Valley. So in the Harappan civilization, they were nothing but the Vedic. The question is it true? Well, when around 1923 to 25, this Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were discovered and excavation done. At that time itself, scientists and historians came to the conclusion that this must be a pre-Vedic culture. Why? There are a few reasons. The first evidence was that all the structures in the Indus Valley civilization, now more than 100 such cities have been found, and every one of them, the buildings are made of burned clay bricks. And brick is something that is very long lasting. So it has lasted for so long without much damage. And it's also a fact that not a single brick has been found for the next around 1500 years. So in those periods, the houses were built of wood, with bamboo, reeds, and things like that did not last. That's why no dwelling has been found from the Vedic era. And the first brick has been found that dates in a temple in Bhitargaon, UP, and that dates around 6th century AD. And here is the, okay, this is the picture of the Sakhi Stupa, which is Ashoka's time, 3rd century BC. And it is also not made of burnt clay bricks. It is made of stone and timber. And this is the picture of the specific temple in Bhitargaon in UP, as it was found by the people who found it for the first time. Now it has been renovated, so it doesn't look like this. The evidence number 2 is that in the Indus Valley civilization, a lot of seals have been found, terracotta seals. You can see that in each seal, there is a picture of an animal. And also there are some writings. Now, the animals, out of them, bull is the most predominant, but there are also elephants, tigers, also this unicorn, the so-called unicorn, what they're calling, with the body of a bull, head of a deer, and one horn, some imaginary animal. But there is no horse. So the scientists concluded that the Indus people, at least in its major time, did not come across this animal, horse. But horse is the main animal in the Vedic literature. It is, Vedic literature is full of reference to horses. And because this was a problem, some of these people tried to create a hoax, I would say hoax, that they wrote a paper. Rajaram Jha wrote a paper in 1999 showing a picture of a horse in a Indus seal. And in the next year itself, 2 professors from Harvard University, they wrote a paper showing that this is nothing but a broken seal, which, when illuminated from one side, the shadow gives this kind of a shape. So it was very carefully illuminated from one side so that it gives the shape of the head of a horse, but otherwise there is no inkling of the head of a horse. It's just nothing but a head of a body of a bull. The third evidence was that there is written script in the Indus civilization. We have not been able to read it, decipher it, but it is definite that they had a script, written script. But it's also true that there was no written script in early Vedic age. That's why the Vedas, at least the Rig Vedas, were communicated by Shruti and Smriti, by remembering and by hearing. And then the fourth evidence on the basis of which they took that decision was that there is no description of city life, brick-built houses, grid pattern of streets, drainage system, other things that are typical of the Indus Valley, like the public bath, granary, nothing like that in the Vedic literature. So they came to the conclusion that the Vedic people and the Harappan people, they did not mix culturally. There was no cultural mixing between them, because had they mixed culturally, then the Vedic people would know about the making of bricks and things like that. And if the Indus Valley civilization is a part of the Vedic civilization, then the script would be same. There is no way of the Vedic people forgetting the script that was used. There is no way we can explain why the Indus Valley people had a script and Vedic people did not. So these things are not explainable. So they concluded that there were no cultural mixing between these. The timing of the Vedic people is more or less known, the timing of the Vedas. And the timing of the Harappan civilization is also known. Known because we have found things in the Harappan sites and therefore which can be radiometrically dated. And we know that the Harappan civilization existed around up to 1808 BC. After that, after around 2000 BC, it started disintegrating, and after 1800 BC, practically nothing was left. So people left the city life and migrated elsewhere, because city life becomes unsustainable because of various possible reasons. And therefore, scientists concluded that the Vedic people must have come in after that. But did they really come in? That's another issue. Now, the Aryan invasion theory has been debunked quite long back. There has been no invasion, definitely. Why? Because there is no evidence of any warfare in any of the Indus Valley cities. There's no invasion. But what was there? See, people do migrate all the time. People do migrate all the time, and the whole history of civilization has been a history of migration of one people from one place to another. And it's therefore not a surprise thing that people might migrate from outside the Indian subcontinent into the Indian subcontinent. It has happened all the time. But they're trying to claim that no, the Aryans were actually the original inhabitants of India. So, so that is the claim. The point is, most important evidence against that claim is the horse, because horse is the prime animal in the Vedic literature, and horse is not found anywhere, any Indian forest. So it's not an Indian animal. So if it's not an Indian animal, and if it is now found in India, it must have come with people. So there's another reason, and therefore scientists try to look for what is the oldest horse fossil that we can find in the Indian subcontinent. And the oldest that has been found is around 1600 BC, because that has been dated. It has been found in the Swat Valley in Pakistan. And linguistics offers another. See, it has been noticed by many people that there are many commonalities between the languages spoken in India and those spoken in European and Middle Eastern countries, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and the whole of Europe. For example, I can give you some very rudimentary examples. For example, in English, we say brother. In Greek, it is frater. In Latin, it is frater. And then in Sanskrit, it is brata. Father, in Greek, it becomes pater. In Latin, also, it's like that. That's why it is, you say paternal uncle. And in Sanskrit, it is pita. So these similarities were noticed by many people. And now we know that not only word similarities, but also grammatical similarities are there. I do not know the South Indian languages, but in Hindi and many other languages, we have cases, we have gender. For example, in Bengali, we have masculine, feminine. In English, you have masculine, feminine. But in German, you have masculine, feminine, neuter, and similarly in Sanskrit. And in many of these languages, the verb depends on the number, singular, dual, or plural. Dual is not there in many of the modern languages, but it is there in some of the, it's there in Sanskrit, it is there in Greek, it is there in Old Irish. So these things are there. And also the way we address somebody who is respectable. In Hindi we say आप जाएंगे, तुम जाओगे, तू जाएगा, जाएंगे, जाओगे, जाएगा. The verb become different depending on who I am addressing, and this character is there in German also. So do Sie gehen, du gehst. So Sie, du, ab, tum. So these similarities are there in these languages. That is why it is believed that all of these languages belong to a language group, which is called the Indo-European language family. And whenever there is a large group, it is always true that it has radiated from one birthplace. And therefore, the linguists have worked on how this radiation has happened, the way biologists try to piece together the evolution of species. In the same way, linguists try to piece together the evolution of languages. And this is what they have come up with. The Proto-Indo-European language has two branches. One are the Centum language branch, the other is Cetum language branch. And this branch, you can see this at the end, you see most of these modern languages. And in between, there are languages that have become extinct or they still exist in some places. But these are the European family of languages. And there is one Cetum family, which also contains some European families, like the Polish, Czech, Slovak, and also the modern languages. This comes from a branch called Indo-Iranian language family, which also contains Pashto, Persian, and things like that. So all these are linked. Languages are linked. And the way evolution of species take time, and a trained biologist can tell you that this particular animal, suppose a fossil has been found, this particular animal cannot be before this time. In the same way, if a trained linguist is there and you talk about a particular word, he or she would be able to say when this particular word originated or when two languages diverged from each other. And that way we know that these languages actually started from one place and then diverged different places. And the most important evidence that there was at some point migration of people from the steppe area near the Caspian Sea. From there, the migration started. Most important evidence has come over the last 5 years only. And those papers published in Nature and Science, you can easily look up, simply search Scholar Google. They have reported that in the Y chromosome of humans, there is a haplogroup R1A. Haplogroup means a collection of genes which occur together and from which you can trace the ancestry. And it has been found that this particular haplogroup is found in the people of Europe, Central Asia, and South Asia, including the Indian subcontinent today. And in a place called Rakhigadi in Haryana, a skeleton was found that is dating from the Indus Valley Civilization. And when that genome was sequenced, they did not find this particular haplogroup. It has been reported in Nature, which means that this haplogroup or the people carrying this haplogroup entered the Indian subcontinent after the Indus Valley Civilization. And so, they have also found out that this particular haplogroup originated in the Pontic Caspian steppe. And further papers reported that there are, this haplogroup can be divided into two sub haplogroups. One is this one, Z282, and another Z93. This one is available. This one is found mainly in Europe, and this one is found mainly in the parts. And then they can figure out when these two haplogroups diverge from each other. And they found that they diverged around so many years ago. Now, the fact that this is found in the Y chromosome and not in the X chromosome implies that the people who came in were male dominated. But I can tell you that this male dominated influx, that does not need to be a huge number. The British who came to India, they had an enormous effect on Indian culture, right? But how many of them came? The number in comparison to the number of Indians was minuscule. So in order to influence the culture of a place, it does not require a huge number to come in, but it is definitely a fact that there was a migration of people from the Middle Asian steppe area around 4,000 to 3,500 years ago. And since there is no evidence of warfare or destruction in the Indus Valley cities, so it is believed that it is not a invasion, it is just a migration, which all the time happens everywhere. The point then is that they are trying to portray this with a reason. The reason is that they want to sort of boost their a kind of chauvinism, that in the ancient past we were so great, everybody was inferior to us and all that kind of belief system. But actually India was great at one point of time. The reason that India was great, really great developments happened in the Indian soil. The true developments which are evidenced, which we have the literature to document that, these things they are not talking about. For example, there were development in mathematics, in astronomy. The Sulva Sutras, for example, contain some very nice ideas in geometry. Zero and the place value system were discovered in Indian soil. I would not say, I will not really claim that, because there were trade relationship between India, Southeast Asia, and China. So historians are not very certain where zero first originated, because the oldest evidence of that is found in a temple in Cambodia today. So therefore it's not certain zero originated here, but the use of zero and the development of the place value system, and if a older system is there and then changes to a new counting system, the whole arithmetic has to be changed, and the new arithmetic was definitely invented in India, because we have evidence of that. Algebra, much of it was developed in India. Trigonometry, much of it was developed in India. And these, the writing system, algebra, trigonometry, all these were done in the hands of Aryabhata, Varahamihira, Brahmagupta, Sridhara, then Bhaskara. So these were the great mathematicians of antiquity. These are the things that I'm not talking about. Astronomy, there were great developments as far as positional astronomy is concerned, though the actual structure of the universe that we know today, the heliocentric picture of the solar system, they did not arrive at. But the positions of the various planets and all that were reasonably accurately documented. In the metallurgy, we have great development, because the method of steel making, called the Wood's steel, was developed here. And that's why for a long time in the antiquity, the iron and steel used to be exported from India to the rest of the world, mainly Middle East, and from there on to Europe. And Indian swords were prized possession for people like that. Later, this technology was also adopted in the Middle East, and later it came to be known as the Damascus steel, but it is actually originated, the technique originated in India. In alchemy also, we have a lot of development, which is very well documented in the book by Acharya P.C. Ray, History of Hindu Chemistry. Medical science, I'm not going to talk at length about that. You know that there were great development in medical science. Great physicians like Atreya, Jivaka, Charaka, Sushruta were there. And Charaka and Sushruta Samhita we have found. And therefore, we know exactly the amount of development that happened at that time. And in the hands of Panini, there were a lot of development in linguistics. In fact, he gave the shape to the modern shape to the Sanskrit language, after which it became accessible, easily understandable, easily learnable. So it was great development in linguistics. All these developments happened. This is also a small part. But this is not what they're talking about. You might ask, okay, why not we teach mathematics from the writings of Brahmagupta, for example? He was a great mathematician. Why don't we teach mathematics from the writings of astronomy from the writings of, say, Bhaskaracharya? I'll come to this point a little later. But the point is that the AICTE, All India Council for Technical Education, has launched a faculty development program on the Indian knowledge system and has instructed engineering colleges to introduce courses like this: Sanskrit for technical knowledge, value education, stress management by yoga, personality development, and this kind of courses. And not only that, last year, 23rd December, not much back, all these institutes received a office memorandum for the ministry asking that all students and faculty members will have to assemble at one place and do Surya Namaskar. If you can read, it's small letters, but 75 crore Surya Namaskar project. So that was a project. So everybody will stand and do a Surya Namaskar. So this is what is coming as a part of the new education policy, rather than proper science. And the document itself proposes that the Sanskrit will be mainstreamed. And there will be, mainstream in the sense that it will have strong offerings. There will be the Sanskrit colleges and universities will become large-scale universities with mainly offering in Sanskrit and things like that. And subjects like mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, linguistics, dramatics will be taught in the medium of Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. Not only that, they're starting a 4-year integrated multidisciplinary BA dual degree in education and Sanskrit, so that there are enough number of Sanskrit teachers everywhere. And Sanskrit will become a natural part of a holistic multidisciplinary higher education. Now, you might ask, what is wrong if we teach mathematics from Varahamihira or from Brahmagupta? The problem is that science is a cumulative process, and science did not stop at them. After them, science has gone forward. It has proliferated in various disciplines. And therefore, whatever they contributed has become integrated into the available body of knowledge. And this is true for all scientists. And this is why we never teach from who discovered it. We do not teach classical mechanics from Newton's writings, from Principia Mathematica. We do not teach chemistry from the writings of, say, Lavoisier. In the same reason, for the same reason, we should not teach from Varahamihira, Brahmagupta, or Bhaskara. In fact, that was the practice in Vidyasaga's time. In his college, the Sanskrit college, mathematics was taught from Bhaskaracharya's writing, two mainly, Vijaganitam and Lilavati. And Vidyasagar stopped teaching from this because he said that these are old. After that, mathematics has developed many times, and therefore a student should learn the modern mathematics. And so he initiated teaching of modern mathematics. So whatever were right in their contributions have been integrated into the modern body, and therefore when we teach, say, algebra or geometry or trigonometry, it contains whatever they contributed automatically. And moreover, they did not write for classroom teaching, and therefore these are not suitable for classroom teaching. But since the Sanskrit knowledge system, they talk about this Sanskrit knowledge system, and now it will be strengthened and it will be part of a multidisciplinary higher education system. I was a bit curious about this issue of Sanskrit universities. They say the Sanskrit universities will now teach things more than other than Sanskrit. It will become multidisciplinary. So I was curious what is happening after the introduction of the new education policy. What I found was that the Indira Gandhi National Open University has immediately launched a Master of Arts course on Jyotish, which is astrology. This Banaras Hindu University has started a department of Jyotish, astrology department. This Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University, I have just copied and pasted from their websites. University has started a BA in Vedang Jyotish, astrology, typically pseudoscience. This university, Sri Lal Bahadur Shastri National Sanskrit University, has started courses on Phalit Jyotish, Siddhant Jyotish, Vastu Shastra, so on and so forth. So you see that in the name of the Indian knowledge system or the Sanskrit knowledge system, what they're actually introducing are basically the pseudosciences. So my contention is that we must protest against this and we must protect education from this onslaught. Thank you. Sorry, I've taken a little more time, about 7 minutes more than I anticipated. I'll now stop sharing. If there are questions, we can.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee, for the wonderful talk. And I'm sure our audience has learned a lot throughout the webinar and has questions to ask. So as mentioned before, if you have any questions, you can write it in the Zoom chat box or Facebook chat box, and we will try to get it addressed by our speaker. So now I will hand over to Abhishek Sarbajna to initiate the question answer session.
Thank you, Professor Soumitro Banerjee, for this wonderful talk, and thanks Shiva for handing me over. So we have received few questions from the chats, and people also provided few questions while registering. So I will be placing them in front of our speaker. So first question is from Abhishek Sau. Is he here in the audience?
Yes.
Then I encourage him to shoot the question directly.
So it's a nice talk. So my question is, why should one bother whether the Aryan invasion theory is correct or not? I mean, how does it matter? If you can explain, sir.
Okay. Firstly, the history that we learn should be correct history. And whenever you see an attempt to rewrite history, you should demand evidences. On what basis? History is not something that is written on the basis of somebody's liking or disliking. Something that has happened, and you have to find what has really happened. And it is always done on the basis of evidences. Our problem is that when we studied history in our school, the school textbook only contained what happened. That means this king was there, after that this king was there, and so there was fight and things like that. But it was never told to us. It was never told to us. How do we come to know? How do we come to know there was somebody called Harshvardhan? How do we come to know that there was so all these things? How do we come to know? This is not explained to us, and that is why now that there is an attempt to rewrite history, people are forgetting to ask what is evidence. And this is what we should say. It is important because the history that the students learn should be correct history. Something that had really happened, which is supported by evidence.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Abhishek. So there are many questions. I will be picking the very specific questions which are in align with today's discussion. So then the next question is from Debashish. Is he here in the audience?
Yeah, I am here.
Okay. So yeah, you can directly ask the question to the speaker.
Yeah, I have two questions. So first question is, how do you conclude that the Vedic civilization appeared after the Indus civilization? So this is my first question. And another was, why would the government like to establish the theory that Aryan are the indigenous people of India? I mean, what is the intention behind this propagation?
Okay. Firstly, I said that the timing of the Harappan civilization is known from radiometric dating. Unfortunately, not a single house or anything like that has been found dating from the Vedic civilization, Vedic age. And so we cannot radiometrically date. But there are other ways of dating. Most important is linguistic. The way the biological world evolves, languages also evolve, and a trained linguist can place the evolution of the language, and from that is another way to place the timing of the writing of the Rig Vedas, for example. The language of the Rig Veda was the language used at a particular time. The language of the Yajur Veda was the language used at a particular time. The language of, say, Gita was the language used at another time. So these are not the same times. And from that one can piece together. So linguistic evidence and physical documentary evidence, these are the issues from which scientists have concluded that. And also we have horses. Horse is something that is almost everywhere in the Vedic literature. And the oldest horse fossil has been found in 1600 BC. And so that is more or less the timing when the migration happened. And from that, they piece together that the Indus Valley civilization was older, and there is no evidence to suggest that anything of the Vedic civilization can be dated beyond 1500 BC. The language cannot be, the literature cannot be, and moreover, importantly, what I showed you was that there was no cultural mixing between these two people. So that is why the scientists concluded that the Aryan migration in the main happened after the city life had disintegrated. Now, why are they trying to say that? The point, this is also somewhat perplexing for me, I must admit, because rewriting history one does with a definite objective. It is not that I believe something, that belief must have some objective. What they're trying to portray is that the Hindu religion and the whole of the European culture, whole of the culture in the Middle East, whole of the culture in everywhere else, all originated in India. It is a ludicrous proposition, cannot ever be true, but that is what they are trying to portray. And that is why they are trying to show the Vedic civilization, not actually, we have documentary evidence that the Vedic civilization went from around 1500 BC to about 600 BC. 600, why? Because the Buddhism and the Jainism originated in the around 600 BC. So before that, the period is the Vedic period. While in every utterance, you will find the lakhs of years. You heard the education minister speaking, right? He said, the लाखों साल पहले, right? लाखों साल पहले ऋषि कनाद ने अणुबम का परीक्षण की थी. Rishi Kanad tested the atom bomb lakhs of years back. In the paper that was presented in the Indian Science Congress, they claimed the aircraft were there 9,000 years back. Now it so happens that 1,00,000 years back, it was only the modern human as a species evolving. Around 9,000 years back, it is only that agricultural society is starting. And before that, it was basically hunter-gatherer society all over the world. So now they're claiming that लाखों साल पहले ऋषि कणाद ने अनुपम का परीक्षण की थी. So you see, these are ludicrous claims. But noticeable is the fact that they are trying to push back the timings to lakhs of years. So India was the cradle of civilization. That's what they want to portray. Next question.
Thanks, Devashish. And there is one question which is very relevant to the current topic of the discussion, that is from Ankita. I can see her in the audience raising her hand. So yeah, if you can ask.
Yes. Thanks, Abhishek. And thank you so much, Professor Banerjee. The talk was really enlightening and it was really needed at this particular time. So my question is exactly to the problem where at IIT Kharagpur, they are publishing a calendar and then claiming certain historical facts. So is it a right way, or is it any way justified that anyone can claim certain historical facts in a calendar like that? And we very well know that scientific facts cannot be claimed just by publishing certain paper or certain calendar like that. There has to be a proper way or experimentation and validation. But in the case of historical fact, they are very easily trying to establish it by publishing a calendar. So how we can
Yes, you have got it on the point. Calendar cannot be a means of establishing a fact. It is not a medium of publishing a paper. But since they have access to the resources, financial resources, the government has given them enough fund to this center of excellence. They're using that to propagate a particular view without bothering to publish a research paper, peer-reviewed research paper. So if they want to contradict the conventional wisdom, whatever is known, they want to contradict, it's perfectly possible. In science, it is perfectly acceptable. Just send a paper to a peer-reviewed journal, get it published. But no, they are publishing a calendar in place of that. This is ludicrous. This cannot be. This is not a method in science.
Thank you. Thank you.
There is another question from Koel. Koel Day, are you there in the audience? So, okay, I can read out the question on behalf of her. I'm curious to know why even educated minds are obsessed with pseudoscientific beliefs. Is there any proof or psychological phenomena associated with it?
Good question, though this is not related to today's discussion, but nevertheless, let me briefly answer that. The problem lies in our education system. Had it been a scientific education system, then through learning science, one would have acquired a scientific bent of mind, scientific temper. And one of the elementary things that science says is don't believe anything without evidence. And unfortunately, this is a elementary, elementary thing in science, which most people who have studied science do not acquire by studying science. So this is why our education system is not truly a scientific education system. What was necessary was to make it scientific. But in place of that, what is happening is making it more unscientific. And because of this weakness of our education system, even the educated people, even the science educated people, believe in all sorts of meaningless stuff, superstitions.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to reframe my question slightly a bit. apart from IIT Kharagpur, IIT Gandhinagar, IIT Guwahati, and IIT Indore, they have also started this Indian knowledge system. And I have a feeling that this strong imposition of unscientific belief at the premier institution is not possible without having a pseudoscientific mindset. And that is when I'm curious that why even the educated who are even at the premier institution, why they are obsessed with the scientific beliefs, and what is the psychology that is working behind it. That was the question. I'm sorry, I reframed it.
Yeah, let me tell you this, that most faculty members of these institutions are very uncomfortable about the fact that such things are being taught. But unfortunately, this is something that is being propagated by the powers that be. And so people are not in general speaking up, but people have started speaking up. People have started protesting. And so the phenomenon that you are observing is not the majority phenomenon. The majority is still quite large number, in fact, are actually protesting against it, but they're not yet successful in these places. These courses are running. But I have not really looked at what is the content of these courses in these universities. Therefore, I cannot really comment on what is being taught. I'm waiting for the textbook on Indian knowledge system that is going to come out. The UGC is going to publish one, and NCERT probably will publish another. So I'm waiting for them to see what is the content of that. Before they're published, whatever is being taught probably are the beliefs of the teachers who are teaching. I don't know what they're teaching. But this is not the main phenomenon. Main phenomenon is people are very uncomfortable that these things are being taught. But it is, your question also had another thing. Why, in the first place, these are being taught? Well, one thing is that the political leadership wants, and in every institution there are people who want to be in the favor of the political leadership, so they take initiative. I'm not sure whether they at the core of their heart believe these things or not, but they want to win favors in various ways, and this is one of the ways. So this is unfortunate, but I have to admit that this is reality. This is happening, and we have to protect education and science against these aberrations.
Thank you, Koil. We have few questions in the chat box. So Dibba Shankar asks, what is the problem of researching on these topics? If we do research, then only we can discard these ideas, right? So that's his question.
Okay. For example, the idea that aircraft flew over the Vedic skies, this has been researched. And the designs that are available in the book, that is the Vaimanika Shastra, this has been researched, and scientists, professional scientists found that these designs cannot fly. So it is not true that nobody has done research on that. But if somebody places everything on belief, since there is some mention of Pushpak Vimana, and therefore there must have been this Pushpak Vimana, Vimana means aircraft, and therefore the aircraft must have been there. If that is the line of argument, then I would say, in Bengali literature, a great literature was Satyajit Ray, who was also a film director. He wrote very nice children's stories. And in one of these stories, it is a science fiction story. And this man, the scientist, has invented something called the Annihilator Car. Normally in a gun, if you shoot somebody, it dies. But the Annihilator gun is such that if you shoot somebody, it disappears. he simply becomes, one can't see him. So Annihilator Car. Now suppose that due to some reason all the literature becomes extinct and human civilization dies out, and much later, 10,000 years later, somebody comes and looks for things and finds that book and reads it. Oh, Annihilator Car. So will he conclude that at that time there was something called an Annihilator Car? This is a piece of literature, and the literature is always a product of human imagination. So whoever has written about the Pushpak Vimana is basically a piece of imagination. We see birds fly, our vehicles cannot, but we can imagine the horse-drawn chariot also flying. That is what was imagined at the time, and that is what they wrote. It is a piece of imagination that is not in any way a fact. Let's go to the next question.
Yes. So there are a few hands from the audience. Ayush, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think part of my question has already been addressed by you, but I would still talk about it and bring it to light. Are you aware about the recent statements made by IIT Mandi's director on
Yes.
his past involvement with? I'm a bit concerned about such ideas being prevalent in the Indian academic circles, and I would want to know about your views on this.
Well, there have always been people with such beliefs. The director of IIT Mandi, he has given a statement, or he has told maybe reporters that he had driven away ghosts by chanting some mantra, so something like that. So he believes in ghosts, and being a scientist, believing in ghosts is by itself ridiculous. But unfortunately, he believes. So problem is that earlier these people would be simply ignored, but now they are becoming powerful, and so we have a little bit of problem. But I can see that people will simply laugh it off.
How common are such people in the Indian academic circles?
Well, I would not say very uncommon. I would not say very uncommon, though they're not the majority. They're not the majority, but they're not very uncommon either. This is what I was saying. They are product of an education system, right? And the education system did not give them a scientific bent of mind. They succeeded in academic, normal, studying and writing exams. They excelled in that. They went into research and they did something, all the while harboring those unscientific beliefs in their minds. And that number is not very small, but I would not say they are the majority. So do not lose hope. The scientific community will ultimately prevail. Don't worry. But you have to play your role in doing that.
And what might that be?
You have to play your role in that phrase. Okay, you have to play your role means I ended by saying that these attempts by the government, see, earlier also it was not a scientific education system, but now the attempt is to make it more unscientific. And your role, or role of all of us, is to protest and to protect our education system from this onslaught. This is what we have to do. And the future depends on how much we succeed in protecting our education system.
Okay, I can see one more hand in the audience. Aradhita, can you unmute yourself and put your question in place? Yeah.
Can you hear?
A bit feeble. Can
you hear?
Yes. Okay, speak a little louder. Yes.
So I put one question in the Google form, but I didn't know the full details of the talks today. So I will actually have a different question than that. it's basically like I mean, you have already discussed quite a bit on it, but still I just want to understand a bit more. How do we really inculcate this culture of questioning in a society as a whole? Like, how do we inculcate this scientific bent of mind? That's my question, because I don't really fully understand like how to make somebody question something, because they're generally, if somebody is not bent in like thinking in that way, how do you put the question in that person's mind? That's what I was.
Yeah. The point is that today the topic of discussion was not that, but since the question came, I'll just briefly touch upon, but I'll strongly suggest that you have a discussion exactly on this at some other time. I'll briefly say that our education system is, see, science rests on asking questions. We ask questions, look for answers to those questions, and that's how we do science. But the education system is such that as a student goes through the education system, the normal tendency of asking questions goes down. And more, he or she is taught that whatever is written in the books, these are gospel, just learn it and write in the exam. That is how our education system works. So the tendency of students to ask questions, that sort of goes down as a student matures to the education system. This is a typical thing, and you have to figure out how should we change the education system so that the questioning mind is nurtured. Okay, today we do not have enough time to dwell on this particular very important question, and I request this the Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter to devote a day to discussing this question.
We have another question from Ramesh. Is he there? Ramesh, are you there?
Are there questions from people in Facebook? Is there somebody keeping?
Yes. So we are collecting all together and putting it here.
Okay.
Okay. So Ramesh asks, the psychological impact of education in the life of youth and children, of this pseudoscientific education and all.
See, when a student learns, at that stage, he or she is unable to judge whether he's being taught properly or improperly, right? And so the students will tend to believe whatever are taught to them. And if the history is rewritten in a wrong way, they will learn that as the history. If Darwin's theory is dropped from the educational curriculum, they do not learn that the biological world evolves. So education is so very vital in creating the mindset, the way of thinking of the educated people. We learn how to think through the education system. And so the education is so very vital. So the effect on the students will be, today also, most students are unable to think rationally. They do not get a scientific temper through the education system, but this effect will increase. More number of students will believe in all sorts of cock and bull stories and believe these are true. And this will be a very harmful thing for one of the basis of science to develop is rationality. Believing only what has evidence. So without that, science does not flourish. So in the future, what is going to happen? The students who are trained in this kind of education system will not develop a scientific bent of mind, and therefore science will suffer in their hands. Science, they cannot do science proper. So Indian science is going to go down if this new education policy succeeds in transforming the education system the way they want.
Okay, the next question is from Sammo. Sammo, you're there? Sammo?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Hi, Professor Banerjee. Thank you for your talk. The question I had sent a question via Google Forms. I was curious as to how much of this current tendency that we have in Indian society to harken back to these past glories can be traced to the tendency in the national movement to sort of reassert cultural pride as a civilization. You mentioned, for instance, Acharya Pihire's work, and of course that cultural pride was a more scientific, historical sense of cultural pride, but whether what is happening today can be viewed as a distortion of what started at that point in time.
Very good question, and a deep question, in fact. See, if you look at the Indian social history, I'm not talking about the kings and queens, I'm talking about the people, their history of the culture. You will find that from around 10th century, the Indian science that I was talking about in so glorious terms, that declined. And after that, there was more or less a dark age. Like in Europe, you had a dark age. In India also, we had a dark age. So, by the way, we have to understand one thing. There's a systematic campaign that says that the dark age was because of the Muslim invasion. That's not true. The timings do not match, because the decline of the science in India started in the 9th, 10th centuries, while the first intrusion into Indian land happened in the 12th century. That too, Muhammad Ghori came only up to today's Pakistan, and much later, the actual occupation of some of the Indian land happened after the Mughals, and that happened in the 13th, 14th century, much later. Which means the decline and fall of science started much earlier. So there has to be some kind of a reason stemming from the society of that time. And Acharya Prafulla Chandra Ray, in his book History of Hindu Chemistry, faces that question in a chapter called Decline and Fall of Indian Science. He points out 3 points. I'm not going into the details of that. One was casteism, another was the shastras, due to which some scientific practices became banned, like cutting the cadavers. And thirdly, the philosophy of Maya of Shankara. Point is that there was a dark age, and after that there was again what is known as the Indian Renaissance in the 19th century, in the hands of Ram Mohan Vidyasagar and people like that. So there was again an attempt to revive a scientific culture. They had to fight a very, very arduous battle against the forces of anti-science, the forces of jingoism and all sorts of unscientific practices, beliefs that were existing in the society. They had to fight against that. Now, in the next generation itself, we see the fruit of their efforts. Within the 19th century itself, we see Jagadish Chandra Bose, Prafulla Chandra Ray, and in the early 20th century, we see Meghna Saha, Satyendranath Bose, Ramanujan. So, plethora of scientists, great. And they were actually doing the science in a society that was still steeped in hundreds of superstitions. So all the time they were fighting that. So that was the time when science was progressing, and the anti-science forces were slowly becoming, losing grip on Indian mind. But unfortunately, this, what is known as the Indian Renaissance, that did not continue for long. And it was sort of countered by a peculiar kind of nationalism, which was based on a misplaced pride, religious nationalism in the main, a misplaced pride in the past glory of India. So where were these British when we were great and things like that? And then people started propagating all sorts of myths about the past glory. And unfortunately, this trend became the dominant trend in the Indian freedom movement. And Indian freedom movement is something that captured the culture of the people. So in the people, the other trend, the scientific trend, the rationalist trend, that did not take root. So this is a weakness of the history of development of Indian culture, that whatever was started with Ramon, Vidyasagar, Meghna Saha, Satyendranath Bose, Raman, that trend did not continue. Had it continued, then we would not see this, what is happening today. But unfortunately, that trend was subdued in the face of the emergent and proliferating the idea of a misplaced religious-based nationalism. Acharya P.C. Rai, in fact, very strongly criticized this. In his writings, he said that in the Congress meetings, you even have two different chulhas for castes, different castes. And in the Congress meeting, those who are fighting to free India, in that meeting, a Brahmin cannot sit together with a Shudra. So he criticized that, but that was truth. That is how things were happening. So the misplaced nationalism, religious nationalism, became the dominant trend. And because of this, we are seeing now the advent of the forces that are strongly trying to propagate the unscientific ideas.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee. As we are restricted by the time, we will be taking last two questions. First, I would like to request Sudipta Das to put his questions on the floor.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, so as a college teacher, so I am a college teacher, and so I haven't any authority to design the curriculum, but has to follow it. So my question is, in what ways can I counter the spread of such pseudoscientific concepts from reaching and being absorbed by my students and the future generation as a whole? So you talked about some protection of this and protest against these. So in what ways can we do that? So my research work is in cosmology, so I often give some semi-popular lectures to differentiate between astronomy and astrology, that kind of thing. But is it enough?
No, I would say that when I say we have to protest and protect our education system from this onslaught, I was meaning collective action. So we need to have some collective action, a movement against this. And the Breakthrough Science Society is launching that movement. There are other bodies also. The All India Safe Education Committee is also trying that. So you have to be a part of that movement in one form or the other. But individually also, one is not completely helpless. The way you said that you try your best in your own way to tell people the difference between astrology and astronomy, if everybody does that in their own areas, then it will have some effect. This effect is also important. That means everybody has a role to play in propagating a scientific bent of mind among the people in our own ways. So one is collective action, which Breakthrough Science Society and the All India Safe Education Committee are spearheading. The other is the individual action in whatever possible ways.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Thank
you. So we also received quite a lot of questions from Facebook. So Aditya Nirmal also posted the same kind of questions that Sudip asked right now. How to protect the nature of questioning mind, where sometimes some organizations dealing with science are being controlled by the so-called government and political agenda.
If a question has already been, similar question has been cast and answered, then we need not go into that. If there is some new question, maybe possibly we can deal with that.
Okay, no, there is no such new questions.
Because when the people wrote on Facebook, I mean, some of these questions that were dealt with earlier, this was not dealt with, so the questions were there. But now probably they have got their answers, so it's not necessary to repeat that.
Yes, so we covered quite a lot of area today by the discussion and later the question answering session, and we also discussed about whether doing the research is essential on these kind of topics. Here, Aniket also added a very crucial point to this. I just saw it right now. In terms of the research, as we have very limited resources in our hands, and the number of scientists in the country are also very limited. So if good fraction of them waste their time chasing such kind of wild claims, it will be really a waste of national resources. It's also a very relevant point. And with this, I would like to hand it over to Shiva for the further conduction of this event.
Thanks a lot, Abhishek, for conducting this question answer session. Now I request Chandrama Moitra, a member of Breakthrough Science Society, Abroad chapter, for vote of thanks and conclude the program.
I thank our speaker, Professor Soumitro Banerjee, for taking out time today, and all our audience as well for this interacting session. So we hope that we have learned a lot and will spread this knowledge to others, so that more and more people get to know the danger of the spread of pseudoscience in the name of Indian knowledge system. And apart from this, I would also like to appeal to all our audience to become a part of our efforts to save science, education, research and scientific temperament in the Indian society by becoming a member of Breakthrough Science Society. And all the details on how to become a member of Breakthrough Science Society are available on our website. So once again, on behalf of Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter, I thank Professor Banerjee, our audience and our organizers for making this webinar successful. With this, we conclude our program today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for conducting it so well.